She was gone in a way that leaves the mind circling the same empty questions. One car left alone in a parking lot with its keys missing, and 12 years later a little girl who vanished in broad daylight with no footprints, no scream, and no physical trace to follow. 2 women, 2 generations of the same family, 2 disappearances that map onto one another in eerie, unhelpful ways. The absence is the only thing that connects them with certainty. If you want to follow every update on these cases, hit the subscribe button now and turn on the notification bell, so you'll get first-hand alerts when new information becomes available. June 2009, Rose Bly was driving toward Wisconsin to meet a relative and simply never arrived. Family members reported her overdue. The worry mounted. Police searches and local inquiries turned up one strange, stubborn fact. Rose's car was recovered in a Grants Big parking lot, intact, with no obvious signs of a struggle and the car's keys missing. The vehicle looked as if the driver had stepped away for a moment and not returned. No witness reported a fight. No CCTV captured a suspicious handoff, and no physical evidence suggested forced entry or an abduction in the conventional sense. What officers saw instead was silence and a set of blank possibilities. When a person disappears on a road, the investigation typically follows 2 tracks. The vehicle is examined for evidence, fingerprints, DNA, items left behind, and the surrounding area is canvassed for witnesses or surveillance that might show the last movements. In Rose's case, those obvious leads were thin. The intact vehicle without a clear disturbance raises a set of difficult questions. Did someone stop the car and by some means remove Rose from the scene? Did she get out voluntarily and something else happen? Or could a medical incident or disorientation play a role? Those are not hypothetical contours. They are the working questions that shaped early investigative strategies. When keys go missing from a recovered vehicle, investigators pay close attention. Keys suggest agency, the ability to lock and unlock, to move a car, and if they vanish, it can point to a hurried exit, an attempt to hide motive, or simply an oversight. The absence of a struggle is equally telling. It reduces the likelihood of a public fight, but complicates the possibility of foul play that would usually leave a trace. Investigators then ask a different set of questions. Who had motive to speak to Rose, who might have had reason to accompany her that day, and which prior interactions could explain a sudden, unrecorded turn of events? Marital tension and domestic disputes, which later surface in Rose's backstory, are exactly the sort of context investigators weigh heavily. They do not prove anything, but they make certain lines of inquiry, phone logs, recent domestic incidents, medical records, more urgent. When a missing person case lacks clear physical evidence, the human records grow more valuable. Phone ping data, credit card transactions, witness recollections, and even small social media breadcrumbs become the chain investigators try to assemble. Yet 12 years later, Rose's case remains unresolved. Its gaps have a particular texture, a car that says pause, and a life that was interrupted mid-journey. Those spaces between facts invite best guesses and worse suspicions. The unresolved quality is itself a form of evidence. It tells us only that the answers remain out of reach. Fast forward to June 15th, 2021. 5-year-old Summer Wells was playing near her home in rural Tennessee. By evening, she was gone. The response was massive. Neighbors, deputies, state investigators, 9 units, drones, helicopters. But the outcome was the same impossible silence. No child-sized footprints leading away. No clothing. No sound of a struggle recorded by nearby devices. The absence of a forensic footprint, literally and figuratively, is one of the case's most confounding features. In thousands of searches worldwide, dogs, drones, and boots on the ground often turn up a clue, a torn piece of clothing, a dent in a fence, a hint of dragged grass. In Summer's disappearance, investigators repeatedly reported no such trace. That lack of physical evidence forced the investigatory lens outward in 3 ways at once. First, it meant reconstructing every possible movement. who was where and when. Second, it pushed authorities to follow all digital and human leads, from phone records to anonymous tips. And third, it made a narrative that arrived through media and social platforms disproportionately powerful. When a material record is quiet, the public record, interviews, family statements, and social posts fills the vacuum. That dynamic can be helpful when it produces credible, verifiable leads. It can also misdirect and inflame when speculation takes root where fact is absent. Both cases, Rose's disappearance in 2009 and Summers in 2021, share a confounding commonality: almost no physical evidence. That silence is the main barrier investigators face. With Rose, the vehicle in Grantsburg offered an odd combination of presence and absence, something physical but little to work on. With Summer, the entire scene was frustratingly clean. Search operations were exhaustive, but exhaustive searches without physical remnants leave investigators with interviews and circumstantial patterns rather than forensics. As a result, both cases have attracted intense scrutiny, not only because of the missing people themselves, but because the missing evidence becomes a story in its own right. There are differences, too, and they matter. Rose's disappearance came against a backdrop of domestic strain. Reports of marital tension, arguments, and at least one claimed head injury before she vanished provided contextual detail that invited specific investigative paths. Who within the marriage might have reactionary or controlling motives, and did interpersonal conflict escalate into violence? Those hypotheses require careful follow-up, checking medical records, interviewing family and friends, and re-examining the last known contacts. Domestic dynamics are subtle and multifaceted. They can point toward reasons why someone might leave, be coerced, or be prevented from making a call for help. They also complicate the public conversation, because marital conflict doesn't equate to culpability. It simply changes the questions asked and the record sought. Summer's story occupied a very different landscape. She went missing from a rural property where visibility is limited, where undergrowth and ravines can conceal movement, and where an absence of immediate eyewitnesses is tragically common. But even rural terrain typically leaves environmental traces that trained teams can pick up, and that was not the case. Investigators and volunteers scoured Ben Hill Road, checking creeks, sheds, and abandoned cabins. They drained ponds, followed possible tracks, and conducted door-to-door interviews. Still no concrete trail appeared. The Wells family's private history and public statements quickly became part of the investigative and social discourse, as they often do in missing child cases, and that made it harder to separate the factual record from interpretation. When two disappearances touch the same extended family, the mind looks for connection. People ask, is this coincidence, pattern, or cause? Authorities, bound by evidence and procedure, must examine whether any tangible links exist: shared acquaintances, social networks, geographic overlaps, or recurrent behaviors. In the cases of Rose and Summer, official statements have consistently warned against assuming a direct link. Investigators emphasize that family relation alone does not equal causation. People travel, move, and have tragedies that are painful but unrelated. Still, the coincidence is striking. A woman gone without trace, and a decade later, a child from the same family also gone without trace. The emotional logic of such a sequence is powerful. It pushes audiences toward narratives that human beings use to make sense of chaos. That psychological pull can be helpful when it reveals overlooked connections, and harmful when it replaces methodical inquiry with speculation. Social media has been a major actor across both stories. Platforms amplified tips and kept attention on missing person searches in ways previous generations did not experience. For Rose, online chatter and amateur sleuthing followed early leads and revived interest years after fact. For Summer, social media exploded into a full-blown ecosystem of theories and crowdsourced efforts. Timelines reconstructed from clips, maps overlaid with possible routes, and call-outs to anyone who might have passed through certain roads on specific days. That collective attention has benefits. It can produce witnesses who remember something when they see a renewed video or map. It can surface new tips from people who were previously silent, and it can create pressure for authorities to maintain investigative momentum. Equally, it carries costs. The spread of misinformation, harassment of family members, false confessions, and the emotional toll of renewed speculation on those closest to the missing. Comparing Rose's and Summer's timelines and contexts, side by side, might reveal patterns that were invisible when each case was examined in isolation. For example, were their shared locations visited by family members, similar timelines of conflict, or overlapping social contacts? Did either case involve individuals who had access to remote properties or who displayed consistent patterns of movement across state lines? These are precisely the sorts of questions that seasoned investigators return to time and again. Investigators will also revisit mundane-seeming records with heightened scrutiny. DMV entries, rental logs, cell phone tower pings, surveillance at retail locations, and even cemetery records. In missing person work, a mundane transaction sometimes contains a latent clue that ties a timeline together. At the same time, caution is essential. The human brain is excellent at pattern matching. It can also coil up around false patterns that feel real but are coincidental. Investigative rigor demands testing every apparent link against objective records. That means law enforcement must weigh the cost of following unverified leads against the potential payoff. It also means being transparent about what is confirmed and what remains conjecture. A difficult balance when public pressure demands answers. What can we learn from this unsettling pairing of cases? First, the absence of evidence is not evidence of absence. A missing person case with no physical trace is not a sign that nothing happened. It is a sign that something happened outside the range of immediate detection. Second, family context matters in practical terms. Marital tension, prior injuries, or known disputes are lines of inquiry that must be pursued, but they require corroboration. Third, social media is neither villain nor savior. It is a tool that can accelerate both help and harm, depending on how it is used. Finally, comparative analysis, placing cases next to one another, can reveal testable hypotheses that single-case inquiry may miss. If you have verifiable information about either Rose Bly or Summer Wells, a time-stamped photo, a specific vehicle description tied to a date and place, CCTV footage, or a first-hand observation, contact the appropriate law enforcement agency immediately. For Summer Wells, the Tennessee Bureau of Investigation and local Hawkins County authorities are the official channels. For Rose Bly, local Wisconsin or state police handling her case should be contacted. Precise, corroborated tips are invaluable. Dates, times, license plates, and photographs with metadata are the kind of evidence that can convert rumor into proof. In the end, these cases are both about people and about systems. They expose the limits of search and forensics when evidence is absent, the emotional strain on families and communities, and the ways public attention can both sustain and complicate an inquiry. They remind us that unresolved disappearances leave long, raw scars in the lives around them. They also remind us of the basic fact of investigative life. Sometimes the smallest, most ordinary detail, a receipt, a bus pass, a neighbor's memory, becomes a hinge that opens a case. Two relatives, 12 years apart, vanish in silence. That silence has shaped how investigators proceed, how communities respond, and how the public imagines explanations. Side by side, Rose Bly's and Summer Wells' disappearances are a call to careful, methodical work that resists easy conclusions while remaining hungry for answers. The search continues, and every verifiable piece of information matters. We'll keep going. There's more to unpack, and this next stretch matters because it moves from what we already know into what can still be done. For the 5 minutes that follow, I'll lay out concrete investigative steps, explain the kind of forensic work that could make a difference, and offer clear guidance on how the public can meaningfully help without hurting the case. First, the practical forensic options investigators still have on the table. When physical evidence is scarce, teams often turn to tools and techniques designed to extract the smallest signals from noisy environments. Ground-penetrating radar, GPR, can be used to detect disturbed soil and hidden voids beneath the surface. It's the kind of technology that, when combined with careful mapping of the cemetery or any targeted site, can suggest where to dig without disturbing graves at random. GPR is not definitive on its own. It gives shapes and anomalies that must be interpreted, but in cases like these it's invaluable because it narrows large areas down to specific, testable spots. Cadaver dogs are another specialist resource. Trained properly, they can detect human remains buried long ago or hidden from sight. Their alerts don't replace lab confirmation, but they are a strong indicator that leads to excavation or forensic sampling. Forensic archaeologists and anthropologists then step in when a possible site is identified. They excavate carefully, document layers of soil, and collect any bone or material evidence with strict chain of custody procedures so that anything found is admissible in court. Digital forensics likewise remains essential. Old phones, discarded hard drives, social media messages, and even metadata from a single photograph can reveal a timeline far more precise than memory. Investigators will often re-examine old devices with updated tools. Software keeps improving, and files once deemed irrecoverable can sometimes be retrieved years later. If someone connected to either case used a phone or an online account around the relevant times, those digital traces can pivot an investigation in a new direction. Second, how case review and cold case units operate. Agencies often bring in fresh teams when a case stalls. New investigators revisit interviews, sometimes re-interview witnesses in different settings to reduce contamination from public chatter. They compare statements line by line, check alibis against fresh data, and audit the chain of previous investigative decisions for missed opportunities. Cold case review can also involve bringing in outside specialists, forensic pathologists, behavioral analysts, or historical records experts who apply new frameworks to old evidence. A different perspective can spot a pattern that was invisible to those inside a long-running inquiry. Third, the legal mechanics of searching sensitive places like cemeteries. Even when a tip points to a cemetery, investigators need probable cause to excavate graves or disturb marked plots. That means law enforcement must build a legal case for a search warrant. Independent tips, however specific, must be corroborated with supporting information. A second witness, an additional piece of physical or digital evidence, or forensic lead. That legal standard exists to protect privacy and to ensure that any resulting evidence is admissible. It can be frustrating to the public, but these safeguards exist for a reason: to prevent contamination and preserve the integrity of any future prosecution. Fourth, the community and emotional impact. When a new claim surfaces, whether it's a location, a stranger's sighting, or a social media confession, the family's suffering is renewed. Every headline, every video, and every trending clip can reopen wounds. That's why responsible public engagement matters. If you have something specific and verifiable, bring it to law enforcement, not to social channels. Law enforcement needs time and space to vet tips, and public speculation can end up derailing legitimate follow-ups or contaminating potential evidence. The most helpful public action is precise: a dated photograph, a license plate number, an exact timestamp, or a first-hand account, not conjecture. Fifth, how investigators triage thousands of tips. In large-scale missing person cases, investigators face a signal-to-noise issue. Real leads are mixed with hoaxes, misremembered sightings, and repeated rumors. To handle this, most agencies use a tiered system. Tips are logged, categorized, and assigned a credibility score. High-priority tips, those with verifiable, timestamped information, or direct witness accounts are investigated immediately. Lower priority tips are stored for cross-reference. It's tedious and slow, but it prevents the investigative resources from being exhausted on false leads. That's why, if you submit a tip, make it as specific and verifiable as possible. Dates, locations, vehicle descriptions, photos with metadata. Those are the things that get immediate attention. 6. Why outside experts sometimes matter. Independent laboratories, university research teams, and forensic consultancies can bring unbiased testing, especially when local agencies need additional capacity. If there's recovered material that could contain DNA or other trace evidence, sending it to an accredited lab with modern sequencing capabilities can sometimes produce matches that older tests couldn't. That's particularly true now, as genetic genealogy has become an important tool in cold cases. If a DNA profile is developed, genealogical analysis can reveal family relationships that point to a suspect or a connection worth pursuing, always under legal and ethical guidelines, of course. Finally, what you can do right now. If you live near Rogersville, Grantsburg, or any place connected to these cases, look through old photos and records with a fresh eye. Did someone visit a cemetery or drive a certain route on a particular date? Do you have a receipt, a timestamp post, or a dash cam clip with a plate number that you never thought to keep? Small, ordinary things, a forgotten social media post, a neglected surveillance clip from a convenience store, become critical when stitched into a timeline. And if you decide to speak publicly, remember the family's privacy. Facts matter, accusations do not. This stretch of additional detail is meant to be practical, not provocative. The investigative path forward is technical, slow, and methodical. It relies on people who do patient work, analysts, forensic techs, K-9 handlers, and detectives who re-examine what the public has already seen. Breaking a case open is rarely cinematic. It's quiet, repetitive, and sometimes invisible work that depends on the smallest verifiable facts. We will continue to follow every confirmed update, and if you have something concrete, turn it over to the official channels. That is the single most effective thing the public can do. Keep watching, keep sharing responsibly, and if you haven't already, subscribe and ring the bell so you don't miss verified developments as investigators work through this new momentum. The search for answers is still underway. And in cases like these, the truth often arrives through the accumulation of small, stubborn facts.